Ross Dellenger is with us, Yahoo Sports, and we were just talking about this in the break, what Ross has brought to Yahoo Sports and gives them a lot of oomph when it comes to college athletics and a lot more. Ross, thank you for your time. Where, in your opinion, is the Cal and Stanford and whatever with SMU and the ACC at this particular time?
Oh, yeah, great question. It's kind of going back and forth this week. I think right now it's still a no. I think the four schools that are blocking this from happening, they need 12 votes of the 15. They got 11 votes of the 15. There are 4 against it. They're still against it, from what I understand. And this week there was a lot of talk, and I wrote about it Wednesday night a little bit. Stanford has kind of a new financial proposal that mirrors the one I think SMU proposed, which is to come into the league without taking a share for a few years. I think it changes somewhat the calculus of how much current ACC teams could earn, in additional revenue. But I don't think it's going to be enough, or at least right now, it doesn't sound like it's convinced anybody to change their mind.
Would it convince anybody? Would the dollar figure be enough to convince everybody to change their mind and not say anything, say, 2 or 3 years from now? Even like I'm talking about Florida State here. Would they shut up if it was $15 million more, or does it need to be $25 million more?
Well, so the way the math kind of breaks down is that each share, the ACC contract has a pro rata clause in there where ESPN has to give a tier 1 share, it's called, for each additional expansion member. It's actually required in the contract. And a tier 1 share is about $24 million. So that's 3 payments, right? 3 extra payments of $24 million. That's $72 million of new money into the league. If SMU and Stanford aren't taking any money for maybe at least 4 or 5 years, up to, I guess, as much as 7 in SMU's case, that extra money, and maybe Cal takes a reduction, that extra money, which is around probably at that point, you go from 72, maybe you go down to 60. Again, you pay Cal or however else that money is distributed, but that gets you to about $60 million, right, for everybody else. Well, it's $2 million per school, roughly, for travel costs, to offset travel costs. Then that gets you to $35 million of new money. If you evenly distribute that, that's $2.5 million, roughly, $2 to $2.5 million per school. I think you'd find a lot of schools, and certainly the 4 against this expansion, say that's not enough, right? Annually getting $2 million extra dollars to go across the country is not enough. It's not worth it.
Ross, out west, and obviously this has to do with the ACC as well to some extent. Is it ACC or bust for Cal or Stanford? And just what do you make of, I guess, Oregon State and Washington State just kind of having to sit back and watch things unfold? Where is the pack right now, so to speak, in whatever that may look like moving forward?
Yeah, the situation with Stanford is kind of leaving Oregon State and Washington State in a sort of waiting game because their top option, I think, Oregon State and Washington State, would be to rebuild the Pac-12. You take the 4 teams, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State, and you add, 3 to 4. You need to get up to 8. 8 is an FBS conference, so you need to get up to 8. So you'd add 4. You need to add 4 in some way. Maybe you take 3 or 4 AAC schools in the American Athletic Conference. Maybe you take 1 or 2 from the Mountain West. The problem with all that is the Mountain West has a very steep exit fee for next year. It's $34 million a school. The American has an exit fee of their own. It's negotiable, but it's probably going to at least be $15 million a school. So it's just tough, right? What happens to all the legal issues going on with the Pac-12? They owe money to Comcast. They have a couple lawsuits. So rebuilding the Pac-12 is an option if Stanford and Cal, don't go into the ACC. Then that is an option. The other option would be Stanford just goes independent. In Oregon State and Washington State and Cal would either go to the Mountain West or the American, which has expressed certainly pretty serious interest in them. So those are kind of, if the ACC doesn't work out, which it doesn't, at least as of now, look like it will, but things can change. They're still having the conversations. But if it doesn't work out, those are really your two options. It's rebuild the Pac-12, or it is probably Stanford independence and the rest to the Mountain West or the American.
I saw this note, and Dan Wetzel, who works with Yahoo, a new Missouri law allows Missouri high school stars to begin receiving NIL money when they sign with an in-state school. If they sign with an out-of-state school, they have to wait until they enroll. And I saw your response, and SEC administrators are not happy about it.
Yeah, it's kind of an ongoing saga where state laws, NIL laws, are evolving and changing, right? Schools in certain states are petitioning their lawmakers, and I think this happened there in Texas, actually, are petitioning their lawmakers to change state NIL laws, making it more, giving them more of an advantage in their state over other states. And Missouri's done it, Texas has done it, Oklahoma, I believe, has done it, Arkansas, I think, as well. Other states are following, and that story I tweeted out with Dan's story is back in May at SEC spring meetings, where it was a big topic. And SEC administrators at plenty other schools are certainly concerned, would be one way to put it, at the disadvantage that they have because their state laws haven't changed yet. And these are probably little advantage, smaller advantages, but I'll say the Missouri one is a little bigger. It's a little more significant. Basically, their state law is different from many others in that any in-state Missouri high school prospect, if that prospect signs with an in-state school, he or she can begin earning NIL in high school immediately. And if a Missouri player signs with an out-of-state school, they cannot immediately earn NIL. You can see how that would be an advantage.
Ross, and that leads to the national legislation question. Do you feel that realignment has maybe put a damper on any of that moving forward?
It depends on who you talk to. I think, for instance, like Greg Sankey of the SEC has said he doesn't believe that it'll really impact the NCAA and college leaders' fight for NIL legislation from Congress. Then you talk to others, and they say it absolutely will and has. The whole basis around college leaders going to Congress for an NIL bill is partly to do with the money, right? The money out there being distributed to athletes, being taken away, donors pulling their money maybe from athletic department giving and giving it to NIL. So college leaders, want that to be at least some kind of framework around that. They want state laws to be thrown out, basically, and they want a federal bill to kind of have legislation all be uniform. And so if you're sitting there and you're moving around conferences, right, for money, for TV money, because it's certainly not for geographical purposes, then I think it becomes harder to argue really anything with Congress. And that's the situation that college sports is in.
Including realignment, Ross, does that have unintended consequences as far as the overall view and kind of how things operate? Because you're arguing one thing, and meanwhile, here are schools flying cross country now all of a sudden for a few extra million. Like, how does realignment play into some of the NCAA stance and some of the anti-NCAA stance, if you will?
Well, yeah, and that's a great point. That's really the main point here I left off when we're talking, answering the last question is the health and welfare, well-being argument for student athletes that the NCAA and college leaders like to use with Congress, it kind of can be thrown out the window when you think about that you'll have, the University of Washington playing Rutgers in a conference game, or you have UCF playing Arizona in a conference game. And, the whole well-being for student athletes kind of gets tossed out the window, that argument. And you can bet that in the next NIL hearing on Capitol Hill, which is coming, I believe this fall, we'll have another hearing or so on Capitol Hill, that will come up.
Last thing from me, Ross, you had the article about Condoleezza Rice, President Bush, and campaigning, or at least trying to throw support for Condoleezza, her alma mater, and George Bush, Laura's alma mater, or his library rest. Did you get a chance did you ask for a quote from either one of them? And just how unique is that story that those are two big names involved in what's going on right now?
They are. I did reach out to Condoleezza Rice's press secretary, and I did not get any kind of quote. I got a response, but I think they're still working on it. I'd asked for an interview actually with her because I wanted to hear. Condoleezza Rice is certainly has been involved in college sports for a while, as she was in charge of the Rice Report after the basketball situation. So I kind of wanted her take on what's happening in college sports, especially to a place like Stanford, where she is a professor and kind of leads their Hoover. I think it's the Hoover Institute there. So we'll see. We'll see if they grant me that interview at some point, because I'd be interested to hear what she has to say. But you're right. Those are two big names. I don't think they're going to change minds really. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's all about the money figure. It's all about the revenue distribution figure. $2 to $2.5 million of additional revenue for these schools on this expansion plan is probably not enough. And then the second part of that is, how is that revenue distributed? How is the current TV revenue in the ACC distributed? Florida State and Clemson, they've been very outspoken about this. They want the revenue distribution model changed. Now, they changed it a little bit, but they want the TV portion of the money to be unevenly distributed, and they want it to be based on athletic success and TV viewership even. And that's really at the crux of all of it.
Ross, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you all about the Big 12. They obviously got what they wanted in the end with the four corner schools, and we talked to you, a million times along the way. And now that that's settled, we've talked to Gene Taylor and Kirby Hocutt and Mack Rhodes and a couple of other ADs, and they all seem to be pretty happy with where they are right now. All having those said, we're looking at the East Coast and seeing what's going on out there, but just what kind of sense do you get from them? Do you think that they're content with where they are, and now it's just a matter of, hey, if something happens, we'll be ready, but other than that, they're kind of fat and happy after this latest get of the four corners?
Yeah, I think that the kind of the reception that I've gotten from a lot of folks in the Big 12 is that they're good. They're good at 16. They're plenty big there. They're happy with the group they got. They're somewhat, outside of a couple schools, they're somewhat geographical, I think, in nature. And, I think it's a good group of schools. And I don't think they're, interested in, I don't think they ever were really, once they added the four, I know there were a lot of reports out there, but once they added the four, it was made pretty clear to me that they were done and weren't interested in expanding anymore. And I think that's probably wise. I think 16 is plenty enough, and there will always be a chance to expand again down the line. But the Big 12 is even before the four, the new four. It's a really exciting league. It's from top to bottom. It's got to have the most parity of any conference in the country. And last year, I think we kind of saw that even before the new four come in. We saw that. We saw that really on any given day in the Big 12, anybody can beat anybody. There wasn't this bottom tier or top tier. So it's definitely an exciting time in the Big 12, and they certainly have a commissioner that has come in at a perfect time to to be aggressive and do what he did.
Thank you, Ross. Recharge the energies because college football has more stories coming your way sometime here in the next 24 to 48 hours. You know that, and you do a great job of covering it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Ross Dellenger, SI.com with us. Oh, excuse me, Yahoo Sports with us on 365 Sports.
Yeah, good to just kind of catch up with him and just